National leader Christopher Luxon and the new coalition government were finally signed in this morning at Government House, more than 40 days after the general election. Governor-General Dame Cindy Kiro officiated the proceedings where New Zealand First Leader Winston Peters becomes the Deputy Prime Minister for the first 18 months before ACT Leader David Seymour takes over as Deputy for the remainder of the parliamentary term. Here to discuss the new coalition government and what lies ahead for the country is Dr Lara Greaves no Ngāpuhi Tarara, who is Associate Professor in Political Science at Te Ao Victoria University of Wellington. She's with us now. Kia ora, Professor Greaves. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, lots happened, definitely. I've been sitting there reading all of the documents and not getting as far as a spreadsheet, but yeah, definitely I've gotten into detail.
Good. We want you to share some of this. Now, following today's swearing-in, the new government will be briefed by Treasury. Christopher Luxon has already told media this morning he wasn't hopeful that the books were in as good a shape as outgoing Finance Minister Grant Robertson had claimed. What do you make of these comments, particularly so early on?
I think it's really important when you're viewed as someone who's got a lot of political, economic nous as the incoming Prime Minister. You know, he's a businessman. He's really traded in understanding business, understanding the economy. It's really important then to make sure that you minimise or position anything that could happen to the economy as external forces or something outside of your control. So I think that's a sensible political move on behalf of Luxon, because you do want to minimise. And, you know, we're a small country and there's only so much you can do when there are those quite considerable external forces like inflation. And of course, understandably, there are the previous spending decisions of the past government as well. And when you're the new kid on the block, you want to minimise that as much as possible. Just a sensible political redirect decision, really.
Do you think he's preparing Kiwis for maybe no money in their coffers?
Well, one of the big controversies has been over this tax cut. So a lot of people going into the negotiations, a lot of commentators, a lot of journalists were saying, well, maybe the tax cuts or what National are calling tax relief will be off the table. Perhaps that is something that will happen. And what we saw in the negotiations was the ruling out through what it seems New Zealand First of the foreign buyer tax. So one pathway to potentially pay for those tax cuts. Now, the other thing there is National have said in their this side of Christmas that they'll want to do a mini budget. So they're kind of gearing up for that first mini budget. And it's not clear yet whether it will be that kind of tax relief package that National campaigned on, or whether it might even be a scaled back one. They're hedging their language. They're being a little bit hesitant in their language. So I guess that's one of the first things that we're looking for in this first, before Christmas period is, will that tax relief package go through? And the other thing I'm looking for is, what is their plan for their first 100 days? So those coalition agreements, they're meaty, they're very big and long. What are those first things they're going to focus on?
Now, I suspect there's been a time where you get very excited about looking over the new government and what they're trying to direct, particularly with their policy. There's been a lot of talk about how the Prime Minister will manage Winston Peters and David Seymour. What are your thoughts on how he'll keep these two maybe heading in the same direction?
Well, the Deputy Prime Ministership was one place where people were kind of speculating what's going to happen there, because although the Deputy Prime Minister is really more of a ceremonial role, when the Prime Minister is out of the country, they become the acting Prime Minister. So it's kind of like a good feather in your cap. It makes you feel sort of important. And I think this splitting of the role was quite a sensible one. Various law professors were saying that you can't job share as such, but having Winston Peters take the Deputy Prime Ministership for part of the term and then David Seymour for the second part was actually quite a sensible way to go about that. Now, also for a relative newbie, because Luxon is pretty new to politics and new to the game, having this first three-way coalition government is going to be a bit tricky, and that's something that I imagine that a lot of us will be watching over these next 3 years. I mean, how he manages Seymour, who we know is, whether you love him or hate him, we know that he's very good at playing politics. And Winston Peters, who's like, what is he even? You know, he's such a legend in our political scene. Again, love him or hate him, he's got these skills. He knows how to work the media. He knows all sorts of things that I couldn't even comprehend. So we'll see how Luxon manages this cabinet. It's a big challenge for anyone, this kind of cabinet. So we'll see how he goes. Good luck to him.
and look, the Prime Minister seems to have left the door open for a referendum to rewrite Te Tiriti by supporting one of the ideas that ACT based its election campaign on. How likely do you think this will happen?
Well, the overall full-on national referendum on some kind of rewritten principles seems quite unlikely to happen. And yes, there will be a select committee submission process on this bill, on Acts rewriting the principles type bill. That is where I suspect we are going to see a lot of the disunity and a lot of the sort of fighting. I imagine people like Hobson's Pledge, an anti-treaty lobby group, they're going to show up with their supporters. So that's really a place where I'm expecting to see a lot of Māori write submissions, get politically involved, and front up to that select committee and do our best to fight it really. And then the second thing that I think we really need to be conscious of and watch out for are those local government elections in 2025. So in my view, I think ACT got potentially, well, in New Zealand First, got potentially a bigger referendum. That is, every single local government place that has Māori wards, and there's 50 odd of them, will need to now hold a local body referendum to keep those Māori wards according to their coalition agreement. So that's the thing that I'm going to be watching, because that's really hard for Māori to run a campaign across all of those wards and to make sure that Māori get out to vote and allies get out to vote in those.
That's not even referendum. That's not even considering the cost, right? Because the cost of these referendums is humongous. Now, I just want to pass by you. Te Pāti Māori is saying that this is the most anti-Māori, anti-tiriti government Aotearoa has seen in generations. Do you agree with this?
There are a couple of places where I could say that they are right. So I've been thinking about, within my own lifetime, has there been a government that has been as right-wing? And I would say yes, in the early 90s with the multiple budgets and the cuts to benefits. But that, even reading Ka Awatea, the report to the Ministry of Māori Affairs back then, that still recognised Māori development and positive spending for Māori by Māori communities. So actually, I would say you probably do need to go back to the 1950s and 60s before the third Labour government to get back to a government that was as this denialist and flattening of Māori rights, really thinking of just denying a lot of the history and the past through that rhetoric. They call it strengthening democracy, but I imagine a lot of Māori are feeling really challenged by it. And it's not really going to be a positive thing. It's not, based on all of the evidence, this is going to be quite a rough ride, this government, for Māori. And it's one as well that doesn't necessarily marry up with a lot of Nationals' values over the past 50 years. So it's going to be challenging for Māori and the National Party and for the National Party these next 3 years. So
what can you tell us about some of the portfolios, who ended up with them, who ended up with what? Anything out of left field for you?
Well, Judith Collins as Minister for Space is an interesting one. She's got a lot of technology, digital type portfolios there. So, Judith Collins is back. She's another one we should never write off. We never write off Winston Peters. Maybe Judith Collins is another one. And then, of course, seeing Tama Pōtaka come into Cabinet, quite inexperienced, but, a lot of experience in Māori community, Māori development work. And he has got not only the sort of broad Māori portfolios, but he's also got conservation and associate housing. So that was an interesting one. And of course, we've got Dr Shane Reti as Health Minister. I think he's only the second Māori Health Minister. So, we'll see how he goes there. And of course, he's also got that Pacific People's portfolio, because National has no Pacifica MPs. Casey Costello was another one, third on the list for New Zealand First. Yep. She's gone straight into Cabinet. So she's someone that I think a lot of people will be watching, given she was part of Hobson's Pledge, the Taxpayers Union, but she's also Māori. So it's an interesting marrying of philosophies that manifest in her. So we'll see, what her positions are. And to be a rookie, be a newbie in Cabinet's a tricky one there. So,
I can tell you're
not
excited.
A lot of big surprises, but
you're excited.
An interesting mix.
You're excited to see what's going to happen. Dr Lara Greaves, as always, Associate Professor in Political Science at Te Herenga Waka, Victoria University of Wellington. Love speaking with you. Thank you for your insights today. Ngā mihi.
Thank you.